There's a type of person the world desperately tries to understand and fails, not because they're complicated, but because they've simply stopped operating within the rules everyone else accepts without question. You know this type. Maybe you are this type. The one who doesn't chase, doesn't beg for attention, doesn't sell themselves for crumbs of validation. And you know what happens? Something bizarre. The more you pull away, the closer they come. The less you need, the more they want you. This isn't about becoming cold or calculating. It's about a silent metamorphosis that happens when you finally understand that being alone isn't a curse. It's a privilege. And when you truly embrace that, when you become genuinely unreachable, a magnetic force starts operating around you. This is the map of that unknown territory, the exact moment when the loner becomes untouchable, and why it changes everything. Something shifts in the air when you stop being available on command. People are trained to expect instant responses. A text comes in, you reply within minutes. Someone calls, you pick up. An invitation arrives, you say yes before thinking. This is the rhythm most people live by, and they assume you will too. But then one day, you don't. Not out of spite or strategy. You just realize that your time, your attention, your energy belong to you first, and that realization changes how you move through the world. The first thing that happens is confusion. They wonder if you saw the message. Maybe you're busy, maybe your phone died. They make excuses for you because the alternative is too uncomfortable to consider, that you simply chose not to respond right away, that their urgency is not your emergency, that you have built a life that doesn't revolve around being accessible to everyone who wants a piece of you. This confuses people more than anger ever could. Anger they understand. Silence, that's unsettling. What you start to notice is how much of your old life was built on immediate compliance. Someone needed something, you delivered. Someone wanted your opinion, you gave it. Someone felt lonely, you showed up. It felt like kindness at the time. Maybe it was. But it was also a trap. Because the moment you become someone's instant solution, you stop being a person to them. You become a function, a resource. And functions don't get respect, they get used. When you delay your responses, even by a few hours, something interesting happens. The quality of what people send you changes. The lazy texts stop. The demands disguised as questions fade. The people who only reached out when they needed something start to disappear. What remains are the ones who actually value your presence, not just your availability. And this sorting happens naturally, without you having to explain yourself or set boundaries through confrontation. Your behavior becomes the boundary. There's a weight that lifts when you stop living on other people's schedules. Mornings feel different. You wake up and your first thought isn't about who might need you today. You move through your routine without the constant buzz of obligation. You create space for thoughts that actually matter, projects that actually excite you, silence that actually heals. This isn't isolation. It's reclamation. You're taking back territory that was stolen from you one notification at a time. People will test this new version of you. They'll send follow-up messages. They'll add question marks. They'll try to guilt you back into the old pattern. But here's what they don't understand. You're not playing hard to get. You're not following some dating advice or power move strategy. You've genuinely reorganized your priorities, and their comfort is no longer at the top of the list. Your peace is. Your purpose is. Your actual life is. The paradox is that by becoming less available, you become more magnetic. Scarcity creates value, yes, but it's deeper than that. When you're not constantly available, people start to wonder what you're doing with all that time. They start to see you as someone with a life worth living, not just someone waiting around to serve theirs. Mystery builds not because you're hiding, but because you're actually doing something worth your time. And that's rare enough to be fascinating. You'd think people would notice you more when you're around. But that's not how human psychology works. When you're always there, you become part of the furniture. Expected, assumed, taken for granted. Your value gets diluted by your constant availability. But when you're gone, that's when people suddenly remember you exist. That's when your absence carves out a space so loud it drowns out everything else. This isn't about playing games or manipulating people. Most people who discover this truth stumble into it by accident. They get tired of always being the one who reaches out. They get exhausted from carrying conversations that die the moment they stop feeding them. So they stop. Not dramatically, not with announcements, they just quietly step back and see what happens. And what happens is revealing. The silence becomes a mirror. Shows people exactly how much effort they were putting in, which is usually none. All those relationships you thought were mutual, turns out they were one-sided, held together entirely by your initiative. The friends who never texted first suddenly have nothing to say when you stop texting them. The family members who always needed favors can't seem to find your number when you're not offering. The colleagues who loved your energy in meetings don't invite you to lunch when you stop being the social glue. Your absence exposes the truth that your presence was hiding. But here's where it gets interesting. Some people react to your absence with something close to panic, not because they miss you specifically, but because they miss what you provided. Attention, validation, entertainment, energy. You were filling a role in their life, and now that role is empty. They feel the void. And instead of recognizing that they never really valued you, they convince themselves that you've changed. You're distant now. You're different. Cold, even. They make you the problem because admitting their own neglect is too painful. There's a strange power in watching this unfold. You're not angry, you're not hurt anymore, you're just observing. And from that detached perspective, you see patterns you never noticed before. How people only remember you exist when they need something. How your worth to them was always conditional, based on what you could provide. How quickly they move on when you're not performing your designated function. It's brutal clarity, but clarity nonetheless. Your absence also reveals who actually cares. There are always a few people, sometimes just one or two, who notice you're gone and reach out with genuine concern. Not because they need something, not because they want to be entertained, but because they actually valued your presence for what it was, not what it did for them. These are the people worth keeping. Everyone else was just traffic passing through your life, never intending to stay. What you realize during this phase is that most human connection is transactional. People bond over exchanges. I give you this, you give me that. But real connection, the kind that survives your absence, is based on something deeper. Mutual respect, genuine interest. The kind of care that doesn't evaporate the moment you stop being useful. And that's rare. So rare that most people go their entire lives without experiencing it, settling instead for shallow interactions that feel like connection but crumble under the slightest pressure. Desire is the hook that catches most people. They want approval, so they perform. They want love, so they chase. They want success, so they sacrifice everything for it. The world runs on want, and people can smell it on you. They sense when you need something from them, even if you never say it out loud. That need makes you predictable, manageable, easy to control. But what happens when you stop wanting? When you genuinely reach a point where you're content with or without their approval, their company, their validation? You become dangerous, not in a threatening way, in a way that disrupts the social contract everyone else is following. Most relationships operate on an unspoken negotiation. I'll give you attention if you give me validation. I'll be your friend if you make me feel important. I'll love you if you meet my needs. But someone who wants nothing can't be negotiated with. They're playing a completely different game, one where external rewards don't matter anymore. And that makes people deeply uncomfortable. The shift happens internally first. Maybe you got tired of chasing people who barely noticed you. Maybe you invested in yourself so much that external validation started feeling hollow. Maybe you just grew up and realized that most of what you wanted from others, you could give yourself. Whatever the catalyst, you crossed a threshold. And on the other side of that threshold, you discovered something shocking. Life gets easier when you stop needing things from people. Watch what happens when you stop seeking approval. The people who used to ignore you suddenly pay attention. Not because you changed externally. You might look the same, act the same, be in the same places. But your energy is different. You're not scanning the room for validation anymore. You're not laughing too hard at jokes that aren't funny. You're not agreeing with opinions you don't hold. You're just there, complete in yourself, and that completeness radiates outward like heat. This creates a vacuum. People are used to others wanting something from them. It's the basis of most social interaction. But when they encounter someone who genuinely doesn't need anything, it triggers something primal. Suddenly, they're the ones wondering if they measure up. They're the ones seeking your approval. They're the ones feeling the absence of your attention. The dynamic flips without you doing anything except existing in your own self-contained reality. There's a freedom in this that's hard to describe. Conversations become lighter because you're not trying to impress anyone. Rejections don't sting because you weren't attached to the outcome anyway. Relationships either work naturally or they don't, and either way you're fine. This isn't apathy. It's detachment from outcome. And detachment from outcome is the ultimate form of power, because nobody can leverage your desires against you. People mistake this for arrogance sometimes. They think you believe you're better than everyone else. But it's the opposite. You've just stopped comparing yourself to anyone. You've stopped participating in the invisible competition that exhausts everyone else. You're running your own race now, and most of the time you're not even running. You're walking, enjoying the view, building something that matters to you. And that self-direction, that internal compass that doesn't need external validation to keep pointing north, that's what draws people in. Real change is invisible. It doesn't announce itself with dramatic moments or sudden revelations. It happens in the quiet hours when nobody's watching, in the small decisions you make differently, in the thoughts you choose not to entertain anymore, in the patterns you break so gradually that even you don't notice until months later, when you look back and realize you're not the same person who started this journey. Becoming unreachable isn't a switch you flip. It's a series of tiny deaths. The death of the need to be liked by everyone. The death of the fear of missing out. The death of the version of you that said yes when you meant no. Each of these deaths feels small in the moment. Uncomfortable, maybe, but manageable. You decline an invitation. You let a text sit unanswered. You spend a weekend alone instead of forcing yourself into social situations that drain you. These moments don't feel significant, but they add up. What's happening underneath is a reorganization of your entire value system. The things that used to matter, popularity, constant social engagement, being known and seen, they start to feel hollow. Not because you decided they're bad, but because you outgrew them the way you outgrew clothes from childhood. They don't fit anymore, and forcing yourself back into them would be ridiculous. So you let them go piece by piece, until one day you realize you're operating from a completely different set of priorities. The solitude that used to scare you becomes your sanctuary. Those hours alone that felt like punishment now feel like treasure. You guard them, protect them, because in that space, away from the noise and demands and performances, you finally meet yourself. Not the version you present to the world, not the role you play in other people's stories, just you. Raw, unfiltered, and maybe for the first time you actually like what you find there. If you feel yourself shifting into a new way of living, the SIM method can help you integrate that change in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the pinned comment. This is where most people get confused. They see you pulling away and assume something's wrong. You're depressed, you're angry, you're going through something. They don't understand that you're not falling apart. You're coming together. The pieces that were scattered across 100 different relationships and obligations and expectations are finally gathering in one place. And that place is you, whole, integrated, no longer fragmented by the constant need to be everything to everyone. Nobody sees this transformation because it's internal. Your external life might look similar. Same job, same city, maybe even the same friends. But the way you inhabit that life is fundamentally different. You're no longer performing. You're no longer seeking permission to exist as you are. You're no longer betraying yourself to maintain connections that were never genuine in the first place. And this shift, invisible as it is, changes everything about how you move through the world. The confidence that emerges from this process isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It's the quiet certainty of someone who knows who they are and doesn't need external confirmation. It's the calm of someone who's comfortable in their own company. It's the strength of someone who's built a life that doesn't collapse when other people leave. And people feel this confidence even if they can't name it. It draws them in like gravity. Words are cheap. Everyone talks. Everyone explains. Everyone fills the air with noise because silence makes them uncomfortable. But you've learned something they haven't. That silence is a weapon, not an aggressive one, a precise one. It says more than any explanation could. It forces people to sit with themselves, with their own thoughts, with the discomfort of not knowing what you're thinking. And most people can't handle that. Think about how conversations usually work. Someone says something provocative. You respond immediately, defending yourself or explaining your position. Back and forth it goes, a tennis match of words where nobody really listens because they're too busy preparing their next response. But what happens when you just don't engage? When someone takes a shot at you and you simply smile and say nothing? When they expect a reaction and get silence instead? They spiral. Their mind fills the void with possibilities. Maybe you didn't care enough to respond. Maybe you're so far above their comment that it didn't even register. Maybe you know something they don't. Maybe you're planning something. The silence becomes a blank screen onto which they project their own insecurities. And those projections reveal far more about them than any argument would have revealed about you. This isn't about being passive or weak. Silence takes more strength than speaking. Every instinct in you wants to defend, explain, correct. But you've learned to resist that instinct because you've seen what happens when you do. The people who matter don't need explanations. They already understand you. The people who don't matter will twist your words no matter what you say. So why waste your breath? Why give them ammunition? Why engage in a game where the only winning move is not to play? What you discover is that silence filters. It separates the people who respect you from the people who just want to provoke you. The ones who respect you will sit with your silence comfortably. They don't need you to fill every gap in conversation. They're okay with pauses, with space, with the natural rhythm of communication that includes quiet moments. But the ones who just want to provoke you, your silence makes them crazy. They escalate, they push harder, they reveal themselves, and you learn everything you need to know without saying a word. There's also a practical side to this. When you stop explaining yourself constantly, you stop giving people a roadmap to manipulate you. Every explanation is a vulnerability. It shows people what matters to you, what bothers you, where your buttons are. They might not use that information consciously, but it's there. Your silence keeps them guessing. They don't know if you're unbothered or deeply hurt. They don't know if you're planning a response or have already moved on. That uncertainty protects you in ways words never could. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of silence is how it forces authenticity. When you stop filling every moment with chatter, the relationships that were built on superficial interaction start to fade. Small talk dies in silence. Gossip withers. Performative friendship can't survive without constant verbal affirmation. What remains are the connections that can exist in quiet. The people who can sit with you in silence and feel comfortable. Those are your people. Everyone else was just passing time. Here's the final twist. The further you move from everyone else, the closer you get to yourself. And that closeness, that intimacy with your own mind and heart and purpose, makes you more genuinely connected than you ever were when you were desperately trying to connect with everyone. Because connection built on self-betrayal isn't connection at all. It's performance, and performance is exhausting. You spent years trying to be reachable, available, accessible. You answered every call, accepted every invitation, showed up for every person who asked. And where did it get you? Exhausted, resentful, hollow. Because every time you said yes when you meant no, every time you showed up when you wanted to stay home, every time you performed a version of yourself that wasn't real, you moved further from your own center. You became a stranger to yourself, And strangers don't make good company. The journey back to yourself requires saying no to almost everything. Not forever, not as a permanent stance, but long enough to hear your own voice again. Long enough to remember what you actually want instead of what you think you should want. Long enough to rebuild a relationship with yourself that isn't based on external validation or social obligation. This phase feels lonely to people watching from the outside. But to you, it feels like coming home. What emerges from this solitude is surprising. You thought you'd become harder, colder, more isolated. But the opposite happens. You become more capable of genuine connection because you're no longer desperate for it. You can love people without needing them to complete you. You can enjoy their company without requiring their approval. You can let them go without falling apart. This is what healthy connection actually looks like. Not the clingy, needy, anxious attachment that most people mistake for love, but actual appreciation for another person's existence without needing to own or control or extract from it. The people who stay in your life during this transformation are the ones who get it. They understand that your unavailability isn't rejection, it's self-respect. They recognize that you're not running from connection, you're running toward yourself. And they're either willing to meet you there, in that deeper place where real intimacy lives, or they're not. Either way, you're okay. Because you've built a foundation that doesn't require anyone else to hold it up. This is the paradox that confuses everyone. How can you be more connected by being less available? How can you attract people by not caring if they stay? How can you find love by not needing it? The answer is simple but hard to accept. Everything good in life comes from a place of wholeness, not lack. When you're whole, you don't need to take from others. You have something to give. And people can feel the difference between someone who wants to drain them and someone who's offering from overflow. Being unreachable doesn't mean building walls. It means building a life so full that you don't have space for things that don't matter. It means valuing your time and energy enough to be selective about where you invest them. It means understanding that you're not responsible for managing other people's emotions or meeting their expectations. It means claiming your right to exist on your own terms, even if those terms make other people uncomfortable. Especially if those terms make other people uncomfortable. The transformation is complete when you realize you're not trying to become unreachable anymore. You just are. It's not a strategy, it's not a defense mechanism. It's who you've become through the process of choosing yourself over and over again until that choice became automatic. You wake up, and you're at peace. People come and go and you're still at peace. The chaos of the world swirls around you and you remain centered, because you found the one thing nobody can take from you, yourself, complete, whole, unreachable, not because you're hiding, but because you're finally, fully here. Look, I'm going to be direct with you. This path isn't for everyone, and that's okay. Some people thrive in constant connection, in the buzz of social energy, in being needed and available. But if you're reading this, you're probably not one of those people. You're someone who's been running on empty, giving pieces of yourself away until there's nothing left, wondering why it never feels like enough. And here's my take after walking this road myself. Becoming unreachable isn't about rejecting people or building walls around your heart. It's about finally understanding that you can't pour from an empty cup, and most of us have been bone dry for years without even realizing it. The moment you choose yourself, genuinely and unapologetically, everything shifts. Not because you're playing games or following some strategy, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself for people who wouldn't do the same for you. That's not cold, that's not selfish, that's survival. And in my experience, the people worth having in your life will respect that boundary. The ones who don't, they were never really there for you anyway. Choose yourself first. Everything else will follow.